What is up guys, Alex from Lakey Wargames here and welcome to today's video. Today I'm going to be sharing with you some of my personal Nighthaunt tactics that I have been using to devastate enemy armies, and is one that I think you should heavily consider for your games. Alrighty guys, so welcome to the video today. What we're going to be doing is I'm going to be showing over one of my new favourite personal combinations that I've been using to absolutely devastating effects to be able to hit the enemy with mortal wounds from out of nowhere. It's kind of the tabletop equivalent of getting the steel chair from under the ring and just smashing the enemy over the back of the head with it and they didn't see it coming. And personally, the units used to equate this tactic, some of them are a bit unfavoured and I think really underrated within the Nighthaunt range. So before we get into the tactics, let's go through what you're going to need to pull this combination off. The first thing on our list is we're going to be in the Emerald Host, which is the sub-faction, the Procession. So that's going to be the sub-faction that you need to be in to pull this combination off. Next up, we're going to need a Guardian of Souls. This Guardian of Souls is going to need the artifact, so it's going to take up your artifact slot, or one of them, depending on the battalions you are running, the Midnight Tome. We're also going to have a Lady Olynder in this list. We're also going to have one Alrich the Drowner, who is one of the less popular and more underrated unit choices across the book, in my opinion. We're also going to have a Mortalis Terminexus, an endless spell, and optionally you can have a Dreadblade Harrow in your list. That comes to a total of 690 points, or 800 points if you include the optional Dreadblade Harrow. So now that we've seen what makes up this combination, let's get into how it works. So to start off with, you need to understand what each of these units are bringing to the table and why we are paying the 800 points, which is nearly half our army for such a small handful of models. To start off with, the sub-faction we're going to go into is the Emerald Host, which is after armies have been set up, but before the first battle round begins, you get to pick D3 plus 1, so that is basically a minimum of 2 units and a maximum of 4 units, enemy units on the battlefield, and at the end of each battle round you get to roll a dice for the units you have picked. On a 2+, they suffer D3 mortal wounds, and if that unit is also a monster, it suffers D3 plus 1 mortal wounds instead of D3. Which is really nice. It's basically table-wide, unavoidable damage on minimum of 2 units, up to a maximum of 4 units. On a 2+, they're taking D3 mortal wounds. This is perfect for enemy hero sniping. In the Antdor season, the current General's Handbook we're in, lots of people are bringing back those 5 wound small wizard heroes that usually don't have a ward save, so they're really nice. Hitting them for D3 mortal wounds at the end of every turn is a great way to chip them down. If you score some extra points there, say they've only got 2 of those said small heroes, and you rolled the maximum, you've got the 4, that's great. You can also pick a couple of enemy units, maybe they're monsters, some key pieces. It's up to you to choose who to chip down, but I do advise prioritising those small enemy heroes, and if you can, their key units / monsters. But that's what the Emerald Host is bringing for us at the end of every battle round on a 2+, D3 mortal wounds, which is great. Next up, we have the Guardian of Souls, and he has the Midnight Tome, which is the artifact from the Nighthaunt book. He is one of the only things in the book that is a Antdorian locust, so in this current General's Handbook by default, because he is the only sort of wizard that fits the criteria that isn't unique. But the main reason we have him in this list and with the Midnight Tome is because, well, he's useful to have for the +1 wound aura and also his Spectral Lore spell to be able to return dead models depending what you've taken in the list. But he's mainly there to carry that Midnight Tome. The Midnight Tome is for a wizard only, and once per battle, when the bearer attempts to cast a spell that would summon an endless spell, that spell is automatically cast with a roll of a 12 and cannot be modified. You do not roll the 2d6 and it cannot be unbound. This is absolutely fantastic because in the current General's Handbook there is a battle tactic for casting one spell successfully and not having it unbound, and wada ding, done. So basically you can just use that one spell at the start of the turn. We're going to be using that on the Terminexus, which we'll get into in depth in a second, but that's the endless spell that we're bringing in this combination anyway, so that's brilliant because now the Guardian of Souls can power out the Terminexus basically for free. It can also score you a battle tactic on your first turn and gets out the spell which is part of the combination. Next up we have Lady Olynder, and her main thing in this combination is her Lifting the Veil ability, which is in the shooting phase. You pick an enemy unit within 12 inches of her, you roll a dice, and on a 2+, the enemy takes a number of mortal wounds equal to the roll of that dice. So she's basically inflicting d6 mortal wounds to an enemy unit within 12, as long as you don't roll a 1. If you do roll a 1, nothing happens. You also get to add 1 to the number of mortal wounds they suffer if they're terrified. And to be terrified basically means they're within 3 inches of another Nighthaunt unit. So if you have something else that charged on in, then Lady O hits them with the Lifting of the Veil. You basically get the d6 plus 1 as long as you don't roll a 1. She also heals herself every time she kills someone, but we're not too worried about that for the combination. I mean, that's just sort of a hat on a hat. It's great. It's a bonus on a bonus. But the main thing we're doing for this combination is that amazing d6 mortal wounds on a 2+, essentially. Next up we have Alrich the Drowner, and his main thing in this list is to teleport Lady Olynder. The reason for that is because that command is such a board-wide teleport. Basically you spend a command point at the top of your movement phase, you remove Alrich from the table, set him up anywhere outside of 9 from the enemy, and then you get to pick a unit that was visible to him. He then gets to take that unit off the table, set them up anywhere within 12 inches of him, as long as they're all outside of 9 of the enemy. What you're going to be doing is teleporting Lady Olynder, and because her shooting attack with the, well, it's not a shooting attack, it's an ability in the shooting phase, my apologies, has a range of 12 inches, it means he can teleport her. She can be outside of 9, so she's eligible for the teleport, and she can still hit someone with that lovely d6 mortal wound veil attack. Next up we have is the Mortalis Terminexus, and that is in the list mainly for its mortal wound damage. It has great ways to be able to heal units that usually can't be healed, but the main reason we're going to be doing this is because it does d3 mortal wounds to every enemy that ends up within 6 inches of it on a 2+. Now the other fantastic thing about the Terminexus is it has a threat range of essentially 26 inches, and at the end of it it's an AoE, so it hits multiple enemies. The reason it has a threat range of 26 is because it's cast with a range of 12, then once it's cast it's able to move 8 inches, and like I said, it has a mini AoE. So if you choose to use the second effect for the mortal wounds, every enemy unit within 6 inches of the endless spell, you roll a dice, and on a 2+, they take d3 mortal wounds. Now the last one on this list was the optional one, and that is the Dreadblade Harrow. The reason he's optional is because of his ability to be able to copy your general's command ability. So to pull this off you will need to make Alrich your general, which means you are going to be losing out on a command trait. But the Curse of Loyalty ability means that once per battle round, if your general issues a command, this unit can issue the same command in that phase without a command point being spent. And that means if you've got Spirit Hosts in your list, which basically all Nighthaunt lists should have in this edition because of the amazing bodyguard rule and how squishy our heroes can be. That means if Alrich teleports Lady Olynder across the table, then the Dreadblade for free, because it doesn't cost a command point, can then copy that command ability and then bring Spirit Hosts along to protect Lady Olynder, Alrich and the Dreadblade himself. So it means that that teleport move is nice, safe and secure. So you can probably already see how this is all coming together, and what we're going to do is break this down in what it would look like across 2 turns. So turn 1, your Guardian of Souls is going to auto cast the Terminexus with his Midnight Tome, and that scores you, again, that can score you an easy battle tactic in this current General's Handbook, because there is one that's cast as many spells as you can, not have any unbound by the enemy, because we're not really making use of things like Mystic Shield, or you're not going to be really in Arcane Bolt range, anything like that turn 1. What you're going to do is just basically use the Guardian of Souls Midnight Tome, throw that Terminexus, as we spoke about, the 26-inch threat range all the way across the table. You're going to pulse off that little mortal wound damage in a 6-inch bubble. If the enemy has put heroes clumped together in a tight group, or there's one of those little 5-wound wizard heroes that we're talking about that you want to take out, or anything like that, that is going to be the ideal thing for your Terminexus as its target. So you're going to throw that across. Everyone within that 6 inches is then going to take d3 mortal wounds on a 2+. The rest of your army is just going to kind of be a cagey turn 1. This strategy really excels in sort of turn 2, turn 3. That's when you're going to break the enemy's back in half and really power through onto victory. So you're going to move the rest of your army up in sort of bits and pieces, basically be positioning yourself ready for the turn 2 engagement. And then once you end your turn, all the enemy units that were chosen to get hit by the Emerald Curse are then going to be done so on a 2+. So that means they're going to take D3 mortal wounds. And if you're really lucky, depending which way you get it round, if the Terminexus deals either 2 or 3 mortal wounds to a small hero, say one that's got 5 wounds, and then the Emerald Curse goes off, and you're going to hit them for another 2 or 3 mortal wounds. As long as one was 3 and one was 2, doesn't matter which, that's 5 mortal wounds. That's a bye-bye little hero. So at the end of your turn 1, without even aggressively moving up and engaging the enemy in the front line, you can pop their little heroes from across the table, which is absolutely fantastic. Worst case scenario, you've hit multiple chip damages, your Terminexus has exploded and dealt some mortal wounds, the curse has gone off, dealt some mortal wounds, and worst case scenario, if it doesn't go off, it doesn't matter because you've set yourself up nicely for turn 2. So what's that turn 2 going to look like? Well, if the enemy has dispelled your Terminexus, it's quite easy to cast again. The Midnight Tome is a once per use only artifact, so we're not able to do that again, as nice as that would be. But its casting value is only on a 6, so it's really easy to throw out. Obviously the average dice roll on 2 dice is a 7, so more often than not you're going to be able to power out the Terminexus. In this General's Handbook, if you really want to, you can use a primal dice if you have access to any of those and cast it on a 3d6. Obviously be aware also in this General's Handbook lots of people are bringing lots of heavy anti-magic for unbinding, so the Terminexus, once that turn 1 auto throw has gone, can be sort of hit or miss, but it's not necessarily needed. It's just one of those, you cast it out, if it goes off again, that's absolutely perfect. If it doesn't, don't sweat it, it's not the end of the world. We've brought enough mortal wound back up. So once the Terminexus has or has not been cast and done its thing, Lady O is then in the hero phase going to cast Arcane Bolt, put that in her back pocket and save it for later. In the movement phase, you're going to use Alrich, and you're going to use his command ability to then teleport himself anywhere on the table outside of 9 inches of the enemy, and then you're going to use the second part of his effect to bring a friendly unit, which is going to be Lady Olynder, with him, again because it's outside of 9 of the enemy, but her Veil attack has a range of 12, so you can basically hit anyone on the table that isn't screened out. And because it's turn 2, if your enemy's already gone twice, so they went first at the top of 1 and the top of 2, after a couple of movement phases, then the enemy is going to be sort of out of position, maybe not so many of them screens. Maybe you hit them with a fair amount of mortal wounds in that first turn on some said screens, and now they're panicking, so they've repositioned a little bit. Being able to use that board-wide teleport means you will be able to fit into a pocket somewhere very nicely. The worst case scenario, you just teleport off to the side and set this up to hit an enemy unit. Turn 3, you can always teleport again. But yeah, Alrich is then going to teleport Lady O somewhere in amongst the enemy ranks where you really want to hurt and bring down a priority target. Then in the shooting phase, Lady Olynder is going to use her lifting of the veil, and that is the basically d6 mortal wounds that we spoke about, as long as you don't roll a 1 because then nothing happens, and the enemy is going to suffer a number of mortal wounds equal to the dice roll that you made on a 2+. So if the Terminexus has gone off, you've thrown it across the table, you've hit them for d3 mortal wounds, then Lady Olynder has teleported for a command point across the table, she's then hit them with another d6 mortal wounds. If you're really going for something, say like a big monster or an enemy hero and it's alive with just a couple of wounds left, remember that you casted that Arcane Bolt, well, just release it at the end of this phase and hit them at the start of the next phase, sorry, so it'll be in the charge phase after your shooting phase. Then you can also unleash that Arcane Bolt. So you basically teleported, hit them for d6 mortal wounds, and then at the start of the next phase you're going to unleash that Arcane Bolt and hit them for another mortal wound, which is absolutely fantastic. So basically you're doing d6 plus 1 mortal wounds from Lady Olynder after she's teleported. Because this is now turn 2 and you've set yourself up turn 1, obviously depending what the rest of your list looks like, I like to really put with this combination lots of Hex Wraiths and a Black Coach. The reason for that is because they do the impact hit mortal wounds, so after they've finished a charge move, you roll a dice and on a 2+, they inflict d3 more mortal wounds. See, we see the theme coming together here, it's just bring them down. As long as you don't roll 1s, just don't roll 1s. But on that turn 2, you are going to be in a really good position, especially with those units. Hex Wraith moving 12, the Coach moving 10, Lady Olynder, thanks to Alrich, now has the ability to teleport anywhere. The Emerald Host, its curse has a board-wide presence, so the enemy cannot hide from it. Then you're going to be able to charge the enemy lines on turn 2 with your fast moving units, as long as you've positioned them correctly in your opening turn. That's why we don't mind being a bit cagey, giving up a little bit of ground, but setting ourselves up for that turn 2, because then you are able to charge in and inflict D3 more mortal wounds from each of those units charging in on a 2+. Then, after all that, if they haven't died from all your impact hits, your Lady O's Veil, your Terminexus possible cast, impact hits and combat from things like the Coach and the Hex Race, if those targets that you're wanting to absolutely devastate are still alive at the end of the combat round of Wave 2, then your Emerald Curse is going to go off again. So on another 2+, they are going to be hit by another wave of D3 mortal wounds. By this point, any little 5-wound heroes should be absolutely obliterated, even those that have probably got 7 or 8 wounds, as long as they don't have some sort of crazy ward save, should again be absolutely obliterated. And again, like I said at the start of the tactics, you don't have to use this to focus down little enemy heroes. You can pick enemy units to be affected by this, which is quite nice. So if your enemy is, say, playing Stormcast, which is normally something with a high armor save but not a very high ward save, they're running something like Protectors or Annihilators, you can absolutely smash them for mortal wounds, and there's not a damn thing that they can do about it. So this combo will absolutely wreak havoc on all enemy heroes or that tough unit, and I do recommend that you try this out. It's something that I've started using since my comeback to Nighthaunt. There's a few things on Tabletop Simulator, a few things I've been testing out at home as well, and I found that this works to really good effect, and I've been really enjoying it. I know a lot of people aren't really a big fan of Alrich the Drowner. He also himself can inflict D3 mortal wounds on the charge, so if you're comboing with things like Hex Race and the Black Coach, after that turn 2 setup, once you've sort of bombed an enemy unit with Lady O and the Terminexus has hopefully gone off a couple of times, then he can join into the mix as well. And yeah, you're just basically cruising around because you're retreat and charge army wide. No one is going to stop your Hex Race or your Coach or Alrich being able to get bogged down, lock you up. So you're always inflicting those impact hits. Once Lady O has teleported into the enemy ranks, she is in prime position to go for every turn with her move and her fly. Again, being able to retreat out of combat, no problem. Just lifting the veil, causing havoc. Once you are in there and have unlocked the door, you can really start to focus down the enemy that way. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this tactic. I hope this is something that you guys like the sound of and it made sense. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of this. Is this something that you are running? Is it something that you would think of running? Or have you found something else this season to be a particularly good tactic? Share it down in the comments below and let me know your thoughts. But as always, guys, stay safe. Happy wargaming. Psst. Hey you! Did you know that Lakey Wargames now has an official eBay store? You can buy yourself all kinds of pre-painted and new on sprue hobby goodness and support the channel at the same time. There's a link in the description below if you want to check it out. I'd greatly appreciate it, and it's a fantastic way to support the channel. Okay, see you in the next one.